Today we've got an absolutely jam-packed episode of fights to break down, to talk about. We've got 24 of them across two cards. Obviously, Cage Warriors 167 took place on Friday, and then on Saturday we had Cage Warriors 168. Two titles on that card. Cage Warriors 167, more of a showcase for a lot of prospects, but a lot of fights to get through. We're probably going to skim past a few on the prelims that maybe didn't light up the world so much, but we're going to try and give every fight and every fighter as much shine as we possibly can. So without further ado, we're going to go from the main event of Cage Warriors 168 all the way down, and then we'll talk about Cage Warriors 167. I toyed with different ways on how to structure this. I was going to cover the main card of 68, the main card of 67, and then rattle off the prelims, but I think there was so much good technique and so many great moments in 68 that I'd rather talk about that first, and then we can get into 67 later, which definitely had some great moments but didn't carry as much of a story and as much of a as much of the technique that I'm looking for and that I enjoy breaking down as 68 did. So as we always do, we'll start right at the top. Main event, Cage Warriors 168, which was between Matty Byfield and Andy Clamp for the vacant light heavyweight championship belt. There's so much to talk about with this fight, but just to give you guys some context first, obviously, Matty Byfield, first appearance in, I believe, almost 12 months to the day. He defeated Prince McLean back at Cage Warriors 151. Prince McLean, a really fun name for all the old MMA heads, appeared on Tough and, has fought quite a bit. And Byfield pretty much wiped him out on that card at 151. He's a Team Renegade guy, obviously trains with Leon and Fabian Edwards, also Jai Herbert, for example, and so many others. Omiel Brown, who's also fighting on these batch of cards. But with Matty Byfield, he was pretty much the next guy in line. I think Bukauskas obviously relinquishing the belt as he moved back to the UFC, which he's much deserved, and he's been doing great there. And like I said, Byfield was supposed to be the next guy in line. Either way, it was always Byfield and someone else as one half of this fight, and that someone else happened to be Andy Clamp. Andy Clamp, obviously a UK MMA veteran, super fun grappler, also very adept on the feet, though quite slow compared to some of these other guys that we see, especially in the likes of Matty Byfield, and we'll talk about that later because I think it posed such an interesting story for this fight. But yeah, Clamp, 12-2, 10 years as a pro, only ever seen a scorecard once. Clamp's obviously had a lot of health issues, has fought a lot to be medically cleared to fight. Just one of the good guys in the sport, and because of that, it was amazing to see him get this belt. I think he performed brilliantly. I mean, round one, so much was happening, I think, in round one, and it was a round that I scored to Matty Byfield. Clamp was feinting the level change heavily, really dropping his knees to the ground almost, and I was worried that Byfield was going to time something really nasty through the middle, and I was expecting that to happen at some point, really. But Byfield never quite got the read on it. He was pumping the jab nicely and landing. Clamp wasn't really landing much in round one, tried to get the takedown late in the fight, but didn't. Late in the round, he didn't get it. I think what interested me about this fight was that Byfield has all the explosiveness on the feet. He hits hard. He's good on the ground as well, really underrated on the ground, actually. If you look at him, you'd expect him to just be this tough banger, but he's actually great on the ground. And I did expect him to have the speed advantage. I did expect him to beat Andy Clamp to the punch, to get the jab going, and it was good to see that. Where I was surprised was on him not really capitalizing on Andy Clamp's I guess telegraphed feints. He wasn't really going to shoot for the takedown, but just putting it out there, and the way he was doing it by dropping so low, I thought that maybe Byfield would be able to get him down the middle, and he didn't. So I scored that round to Byfield. Round two, neither guy really thrown in combination in this fight. Byfield tripling up on the jab, I think, was brilliant, and that one strike was really messing Clamp up. And I personally thought Byfield could win the fight just off his jab alone, the way he was popping that out. But there came a point, halfway through the round, I'd say, where Clamp gets his first takedown and, jumps on the back of Byfield, flattens him out, lands big elbows while also looking for the rear naked choke. And you felt at that moment that Byfield was breaking, or that Clamp had broken him. And I tweeted it. I believe I tweeted it at the end of round two. I said something along the lines of Byfield is broken. It would be interesting to see how long it takes Clamp to be able to get Byfield down again. I thought he exhausted so much energy, or exerted so much energy, or maybe both. Um, but it took him ages to get Byfield down. Got him down at the end. Didn't manage to get the finish. Could he do it again in round three? And literally, round three starts. Clamp drags the legs from underneath Byfield, gets him down with practically the entire round to play out. Looked for the rear naked choke, bailed on it because he didn't really have the angle, landed a lot of strikes, flattened him out, continued elbow in striking, elbow in striking. At one point, he goes for an armbar, so he throws this armbar, and Byfield does brilliantly to escape it, goes into Clamp's guard, almost gets caught in another armbar. The atmosphere was electric in the arena, from what I could tell from the broadcast. Obviously, I wasn't there. But it just seemed like the arena was really popping, and commentary was great for this one. But what I loved was, even though Byfield escaped the second armbar, Clamp managed to get on top and started landing again. And at that point, it just felt like Byfield was gone. His eyes didn't look in it. He's staring into space, just seemed so defeated as he was trying to defend. And then it was elbow after elbow, strike after strike, and the referee was forced to step in. And so Andy Clamp is the new Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion. I thought the second and third rounds from him were absolutely impeccable. Really, really impressed with him. It's such a great story. You guys, if you've listened to the pod long enough, I love these types of title wins, your Mick Stantons and these types. When Judo Jim got the belt as well recently. I love when these guys who have poured their hearts into this sport and not had a dramatically glorious career. They haven't gone and conquered gold in the biggest organizations in the world. They haven't been one half of a fight of the night on a big pay-per-view on the UFC. They haven't done much of this stuff, right? What we have seen from these guys is they've busted their guts at a regional level. And some of them, have gone and fought in Judo Jim's a bad example to use here because he fought in the UFC and he fought everywhere and he did brilliantly. But these guys like Stanton and Clamp, they fight in these big European promotions. They fight regionally as well. And it's just so great to see all of that work pay off. I mean, Andy Clamp's been fighting for 10 years, 10 years as a pro to finally get that big piece of gold is amazing. And he's not been in Cage Warriors long. Remember how long it took him to finally get here, was knocked out in his first fight. Keep that in mind. Andy Clamp in 2022 was knocked out in his first Cage Warriors appearance. And fast forward to 2024, and he's the new Cage Warriors light heavyweight champ off the back of a couple of really good finishes. It's really impressive. I'm so happy for him. I think it's much deserved. Matty Byfield, if you have stock in the Matty Byfield campaign, please keep him. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be fighting for gold again soon. I just think he didn't really read the fight well enough. I don't think there were some tells in this fight, and I think there were some strikes that he could have thrown. And really, I keep emphasizing it, but all due respect to Andy Clamp, but I think if Byfield had just thrown a couple of knees up the middle in the first round, the way Clamp was feinting the shots and not shooting, and I know he was looking to draw that reaction out of Byfield, and maybe that's why Byfield wasn't kicking and wasn't kneeing, because he didn't want to get taken down. But I really think that the speed advantage that Byfield had, he didn't really use it to his full potential, in all honesty. But, we've got so many fights to break down still. We've still got another 23, so let's move on. There's another title fight on this card, which, took place, was supposed to be the prelim headliner, ended up being the main card opener. And we'll talk about that in due time. But just want to give Andy Clamp all the plaudits in the world, all the flowers. It's amazing to see him as champ, and I really cannot wait to see who he defends this belt against next. Co-main event of Cage Warriors 168 was John De Jesus versus Luke Riley. Anyone who's listened to this pod, anyone who follows me, is probably just, extremely tired of hearing me talk so much about Luke Riley. I wax lyrical about this guy so often, and I'm going to do it again because Luke Riley came into this fight 24 years of age, 8-0, with 2 fight of the years under his belt last year. Either one of those fights could have won fight of the year. The Alexander Loof fight is probably the greatest Cage Warriors fight of all time, for my money. And like I said, entered this fight 8-0, 24 years of age. leaves this fight 9-0, almost 10-0. He's been brilliant. The matchmaking for him has been brilliant. It truly has. There haven't been layups. There's been, patient, careful, methodical matchmaking to really see what this guy's made of. And he's passed the test with everyone he's fought. He's had wars. He's had fights where he's beat the shit out of people. And he's had fights like this one where it's been a more methodical, slower approach, but still such a violent and dangerous approach from Luke Riley. And credit to John De Jesus, entered this fight on a 2-fight win streak in Cage Warriors. One of my favorite fighters from the San Diego scene. Great to see him in Europe. Super fun veteran, real savvy striker. He's fought in Bellator. He's fought all over. I think he's 15-10 or 15-11 coming into this. And one of those fighters that fights in such an awkward way and has quite an open stance and will bounce around the cage that he can be a bit hard to figure out. I think in round one, Luke Riley did a great job prodding straight hands to the body. A lot of feinting from both guys. Luke Riley had a combination of hooks that snapped De Jesus' head back. Snapping roundhouse kick to the body as well was really nice. De Jesus had a double jab that he kept pumping, which was cool. And I think that Riley started this fight off a bit slow, which is good, right? Like the guy's always in these high octane fights. And I really thought that the way the first round went, that he was really going to take this super slow. But he did ramp up the pace later on in the fight. Straight hand to the body, so good from Luke Riley. Like this guy's technique, his boxing, these next gen MMA guys, they know how to scrap. They've got iron chins. It's just an incredible time to be following like the emergence of these fighters. We'll talk about Fran Breen later, but my word is basically like a flyweight Luke Riley. But more about Luke Riley here. Round two, I felt like De Jesus' awkward movement was kind of giving him a bit of pause. Then a really nice left hand over the top from Luke Riley to, I guess what I found in this fight was De Jesus was awkward until Luke Riley clocked him with something. And then he would revert to fighting in a very, traditional, orthodox stance, not really, moving too much. And I think that's where Riley, when Riley realized he could put shots behind each other, and this is a guy who always throws in combination, right? So I'm not here to say that he finally started fighting in combination. He's always done it. But I felt like in this fight, there was a lot of singular shots to start it off, which I think was part of the game plan. Straights to the body, like I said, the roundhouse kick, left hand over the top. But what I really liked was that once Riley realized I can go on this guy, like I hit him once and he stops being weird and awkward, and I can just start going and letting off strikes. And towards the end of the second round, beautiful body work, multiple hooks to the body, rip into the head. Had it 20-18, Riley going into the third. And what I love about Riley, and I'll always say it, is when he's got a man up against the fence, this guy is a killer. He just, I don't know, it's like you have 100 strikes coming your way. You can't move left, you can't move right. He's punching your head, he's punching your body, he's kneeing your head, he's kicking your calves. Amazing, like genuinely incredible. Round three, this is when we got like the patented trademark Luke Riley, swarming De Jesus early, big left hook, flurries to the body. There's two straight right hands that he ripped to the body and let a couple of hooks fly as well. And De Jesus was starting to really break. I loved Riley's elbow over the top against the fence. He doesn't throw them very often, but when he does, they fuck people up. And he was working, I think Brad Wharton even said this on the broadcast, he was working De Jesus like a heavy bag. He really was. It was almost target practice. What I liked as well, though, to give De Jesus his props, really nice step and knee to the body in this round. He does hurt Riley at one point towards the end of the round. I don't know if like maybe a dislocated rib or maybe a broken rib from Luke Riley. It'd be interesting to, maybe I'll go digging afterwards, see if he said anything, but it felt like he definitely, something hurt him. He wasn't like wobbled, but he definitely started fighting, on the back foot, which Luke Riley never does. You see this guy take a step backwards, something's probably wrong. But yeah, he was moving backwards, rotating around the fence, kind of running from De Jesus. I think there were only 50 or 60 seconds left on the clock. And, De Jesus couldn't really cut the cage or do anything to put him in a spot above her. And also, just before I wrap up this round, stepping elbow from Luke Riley, just gorgeous. Again, this guy has so many different tools on the feet, so many different combinations, so many ways to hurt you. And I really think John De Jesus, you look at his record, you won't think much of it. But for Riley to go 15 minutes with this guy who can be awkward, a guy who can hurt people, a guy who's fought everywhere, has fought so many different types of fighters, it's a great win for Luke Riley. 9-0 now, I scored it 30-27 for him. I'm tired of calling him a prospect. Like, I really am. I think, and I said this on the last episode where he fought, he's a superstar in the making. There's no more prospect here. There is just a very fucking incredible fighter who we need to start pushing in the right direction. I said this in 2022 on the pod. By the end of 2024, Luke Riley will have gold wrapped around his waist. Let's do it. Honestly, let's do it. Like Ian Dean, all the matchmakers, Graham Boylan, let's put him in a title fight. It doesn't matter who is, how it happens. He doesn't have to fight anyone else. He doesn't have to fight other contenders, I don't think. I think you throw him in. Maybe you do a card in Manchester again, or you do a card in Liverpool. Of course, that would be like the ultimate one if they could get to the Echo and put him on a card. But I'm not quite. I don't know. I'm not quite certain on what's next for Luke Riley at Cage Warriors. A lot of people are talking about the UFC. I don't think so just yet. I think get him fighting for gold in Cage Warriors. Keep building up his stock. He's 9-0. Let's make his 10th fight a title fight. This kid is next level. No more calling Luke Riley a prospect. If I see you call him a prospect, I will virtually give you a big slap, because he's far better than, there's guys on this card that we're going to call prospects, guys like Fran Breen, guys like James Power. Luke Riley ain't there anymore, man. Like, give this guy's respect. Start putting him in title fights. He's no longer just a kid growing up before our eyes. Like, he's a man, and he's scrapping, and he's putting on wars, and he's putting on methodical striking clinics. Get him in there for the gold. Get him in there for gold, and let's see what happens. Speaking of prospects on this card, we had Gianluca Rocca versus James Power. Rocca making his second Cage Warriors appearance, 8-3 as a pro. Recently won by submission against Guido Possidente, which was 30-second submission, which was mad. 6 of his 8 wins via finish. James Power, an actual prospect here, and a big prospect who was undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a pro until he faced Mikel Pagani back in July. Really good back and forth scrap, which he did lose. So comes into this fight 5-1 with his first ever loss, like amateur and pro included. So it was interesting to see how he'd react to that. Well, how would he fight? Would he be conservative? Would he be reckless? And actually what we got a really patient. I know Power's gone on record to say that he wasn't happy with his performance, and I believe it was him. I think he gave himself a rating of like 6 out of 10 or something like that. This shit happens. Like, Gianluca Rocca's a really good fighter, and I think that Power fought the fight he needed to fight in order to get his hand raised, and there's no shame in doing that. Sometimes you come across these points in your career where getting back on the horse is more important than impressing people, and I think James Power came in here, traded knees in the clinch with Rocca, realized that he could control him against the fence, and that's what he did. Look, I'm not going to go into this fight too much because it really was 15 minutes of fighting against the fence, which again, I'm not criticizing, because I think if you need to get back on the horse, you need to get back on the horse. Big head kick in round 2, I think, was probably the coolest part of the fight. But really for Power, he was fighting against the fence, controlling Gianluca Rocca. Some frustration from Rocca's part, but I'll always say, like, if someone's holding you against the fence for 15 minutes, they're not the problem, you are. And, people who defend it in MMA in general, I remember when Masvidal fought Usman the first time on Fight Island, and it was the whole thing of, Usman just held him against the fence and stamped at his toe for 25 minutes. Then fucking do something about it then. If it's that much of a problem, if it's that much of a sacrilege and a travesty to fight that way, then the opponent who's being controlled should do something about it. And Gianluca Rocca couldn't do anything here. Had it 30-27, James Power. Genuinely such an awesome prospect. Good to see him back in the win column as well. Next fight that we'll talk about is Harold Cohen versus Adam Cullen. Really interesting fight here. Harold Cohen 6-0 as a pro, making his Cage Warriors debut. Cullen 7-1, back in the win column. Did have a massive shock KO loss last year to Dimitri Gerlin, which was shortlisted for knockout of the year for me. or finish of the year even. All 7 of Adam Cullen's wins come via first round finishes, so we were expecting fireworks here. Harold Cohen, I knew nothing about this guy coming into this fight, so I was pleasantly surprised to see that the record held up. Sometimes you get these guys who are 5-0, 6-0, 4-0, and they've fought absolutely nobody, and they come into these fights and they get crushed. But props to the guy, he fought a really good fight. I personally, before I get into the breakdown of the fight, I thought Adam Cullen won, had it 29-28. Cullen gave him rounds 1 and round 3. But that's not to take anything away from Harold Cohen. It was a very, very close, very competitive fight. But I think something has to be said about Cullen when fights come out of the first round. We've seen it twice now, where the fights have left the first round and Cullen's lost. And should he have won this fight? Yes. And actually think he fought pretty well. But it's, how do you react when you come out of that first round? And now having 2 losses to his name, I'd be very interested to see what Adam Cullen does next, who he fights next, and how he fights next, because this could become a psychological thing. I don't think it will. I still think Adam Cullen is super fun. If this guy gets you to the ground, it's usually game over. But Cohen was very, very game in this fight. He had a trip takedown of his own in the first round, attacked the single leg, swept through, rolled through, kept a hold of the ankle to run the pipe and really settle Cullen on the ground. Loved some of the technique in this fight, loved the grappling attempt. What was awesome from Cullen was that, we all know he's got a great anaconda choke or a front choke as well, using that as a setup to explode back to his feet. Really good in this fight. And I scored the first round to Cullen. I thought he did really well. He dominated most of the grappling positions. In round 2, that's where I gave it to Cohen. Another nice inside trip. He had quite a few of these really nice. And I really think that once round 2 hit, Cohen started to look like the better grappler, which I was really surprised by. Usually, Cullen smokes people on the ground, but Cohen gave as good as he got, really. One of his elbows just busted Cullen right open. But Cohen just kept going, kept getting on top, kept elbowing away. 19-19 going into the third. And I thought Cullen did really well here, again, from a mental perspective, from a psychological perspective. Last time he saw a third round, he got absolutely starched by Dimitri Gerlin. Here, I thought he fought really well. There weren't really any cobwebs there or any things that he was, visibly scared of, or from a technical perspective that, he was freezing or anything like that. I like the lead left hook from Cullen in this fight, the knees to the head. The more I think about this fight and the more I think about this third round, I really struggle to see. It's tough. I don't want to disparage Cohen, but I do struggle to see how this fight was scored in his favor. 1 and 3, I think, were quite clearly Cullen's. Third was definitely Cullen's. Second is Cohen's. I guess it's how you settle on the first. And I've not seen the scorecards, broken down to see where the judges went with their 10-9s, but I really do think Cullen won this fight, guys. I think he did enough. I think he did enough in the first. The third was definitely his. But look, he's 7-2 now. Harold Cohen's 7-0. And I'm sure we're going to see this guy again at 155 pounds. Really impressive performance. I thought, you bring in a guy who no one's really heard of, and you put him in there with a guy who's, one of your golden eggs, really, in Cullen. Let's not forget, when Cullen was 7-0, or when Cullen was 6-0 even, this was one of the best prospects in England, and he still is, don't get me wrong. But Harold Cohen came in here against a guy who looked like he was back on the horse, and pushed him over again. Props to Harold Cohen, good performance. Props to Adam Cullen as well. I thought he should have gotten his hand raised, but it doesn't always go that way. And I think we'll see Cullen again, and we'll see him winning again soon. And Harold Cohen, I am very excited to see what he does next. All right, swiftly moving on, we had Alessandro Giordano versus Sam Kelly, bantamweight, which might just be the bloodiest fight we'll see in Cage Warriors. There was a bloodier fight in MMA on one of the Lux cards, but we won't talk about that here because we're not called the Lux Gloves podcast or whatever color. I don't even think they have a specific color of gloves. Anyways, talking Cage Warriors here. Sam Kelly, Alessandro Giordano, absolute bloodbath. Giordano comes into this fight 0-2 in Cage Warriors, but looking super competitive in both of those fights. Sam Kelly probably needs no introduction. Had an 11-second knockout last year, which at the time was the fastest KO of all time, until Jimmy Quinn came in and somehow had a knockout that was even faster. They also had a phenomenal back and forth scrap with Gianluca Scottoli, which he did lose. All 5 of Sam Kelly's wins as a pro via finish. You know what this guy comes in here to do. And it was just a straight up scrap that, in all honesty, Alessandro Giordano got the best of throughout the entire fight. Kelly's toughness and Kelly's resilience is what made this fight as cool as it was. But really, like from just if we're just looking at the performance of both fighters, Alessandro Giordano put an absolute hellacious beating on Sam Kelly. Go on my Twitter, Yellow Gloves Pod. You'll see a picture I retweeted from Dolly Clue, who's, by the way, the GOAT photographer. You'll see a picture of Sam Kelly getting punched, and it's one of those where it's at the point of impact. It doesn't even look like Sam Kelly. Blood's flying everywhere. It's a great shot. It really does give you an insight into how insane Giordano was in this fight because, again, he beat the hell out of Sam Kelly. Sam Kelly, as expected, came out like a house on fire. Giordano landed a few nice strikes. Sam Kelly kept slipping in this fight, just trying to get his licks in, and he just kept slipping, and Giordano just kept punishing him. Every time he slipped, as he came back to his feet, bang, 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 Giordano would hit him with 2, 3, and was really hurting him. Giordano dropped Kelly in round 1 with a couple of short hooks. Kelly just looked really skittish. The straight right hand from Giordano early busted his nose right up, scored it 10-9 to him in round 1. Round 2, the left jab again, messing Kelly up, but the guy just wouldn't stop marching forward, no matter what Giordano threw. Kelly did start to grow into the round a little bit, but had a big left hook from an exit in the clinch, but then every time he got 1 or 2 good shots in, Giordano's putting 5, 6, 7 on him, and these massively impactful shots, spinning back elbow against the fence. He's putting a pace on Kelly, and Kelly was just eating it all. But what he was throwing in return just wasn't enough to make this fight competitive. The competitiveness of the fight came from the fact that he just wouldn't die, and Giordano just threw everything at him. And eventually that did work because with, I believe, less than a minute left of the fight in round 3, Giordano left jab, just stunning, like genuinely stunning, opened up Sam Kelly for a tremendous sequence. He had a straight left, tripled up on the left hook to the body, right hand behind it, and then a left hook to the chin that broke Kelly, dropped him. Referee decided he'd seen enough. Referee was already stepping in between rounds, telling Sam Kelly, like, I need to see something here or I'm going to stop the fight. But that combination from Giordano, like, I will say it again because I literally wrote it down. It was beautiful. Straight left, tripled up on the left hook to the body, right? Then he puts a right hand behind it to the head, and then a left hook to the chin to break Kelly up against the fence. It was a gorgeous sequence. Basically, effectively for me, the best finish on the card, in all honesty. Alessandro Giordano, 7-3 now. From all I've seen from the Italian MMA guys, this is a guy to really look out for. And, 3 fights in Cage Warriors now. Every time I've seen him, he's looked brilliant, even when he's lost. At 135 pounds, we might have a player in Alessandro Giordano. And for Sam Kelly, I just need to see this guy once or twice a year. Probably once with the way he fights, because you don't want to, risk any damage or any more damage than what's already happening. But Sam Kelly's just a pure entertainer, man. Like one of the toughest guys you'll find. And, he's 5-3 now, but I could watch Sam Kelly fight until the end of time. Just a brilliant fighter. But Alessandro Giordano, take a bow. Tremendous performance. All right, and now we move into another title fight, which was supposed to be the prelim headliner, which I don't hate. I believe they were doing it because, trying to attract different audiences. I believe this might have been on YouTube in some countries or something like that. I don't quite know exactly where they were getting the promotion from, but I know that it was structured this way in order to attract other audiences that otherwise wouldn't be watching on Fight Pass. I believe that's why. So, Liam Gittins versus Roberto Hernandez is the fight that I'm talking about. Bantamweight title on the line. Liam Gittins, the Yellow Gloves 2023 Fighter of the Year, won the vacant belt against Reece McEwen in November with a really dominant showing. Roberto Hernandez, you guys know I hold him in high regard. One of the many San Diego guys on this card, and he's been running amok in the US for Cage Warriors. 7 wins in a row for the promotion, 3 finishes, 9-1 coming into this fight. I've been saying, go back and listen because I think I've covered 3 or 4 of Hernandez's fights now. every time I say, let's see him in Europe against really good opposition, against these top European talents. And it finally happened. And before I get into that, we had a question from Jack Wannen, who's a good pal of mine on social media, and is someone that I talk to regularly, and someone that actually gave me the push to start this podcast, because he was running a show called JMMA Monday, which I guessed I appeared on, I guess, a couple of times. And I've been podcasting for a while. I've done a lot of football podcasts in other places and all of that, but it was good to really get that inspiration to start this one from Jack. But Jack asks, did you like how California fighters were integrated this weekend, or would you rather keep those brands separate? If you listen to this pod, and even if you don't, I'll tell you right now, I've long been against the San Diego thing. I think that in the past the matchmaking's been terrible. I think in the past the fighters haven't been interesting, the fights haven't been great. But I've also gone on record to say in the last year, I've really enjoyed what they're doing. And these things take time, right? Like, it's not, we all remember Cage Warriors used to do cards in like Bahrain back in the day, like 10, maybe more years ago. It's not like traveling to other places and trying to tap into different sources of talent is new to them. They're doing it in Italy and they're doing a tremendous job of it. I think the US one took a while, but we're really starting to see the fruits of their labor out there. Guys like Roberto Hernandez, guys like Anthony Orozco, who, we will also talk about because he fought on Cage Warriors 167 on Friday. But, to answer Jack's question, would I rather keep the brand separate? No. This is what I want to see. I want to see Cage Warriors isn't just like, people who aren't initiated or people who don't understand it will say, oh, it's just a regional UK promotion. And it's not, right? This is a European promotion that has gone global many times before, has, like I said, gone to Bahrain, has gone to all these different places to try and find talent. And the US is just their newest place to do it in. And the California scene has great fighters. John De Jesus has been awesome. Like, rediscovering Wilson Hayes has been amazing for the promotion. Roberto Hernandez, Anthony Orozco, big prospects. Being able to bleed all these other prospects as well, like Teddy Stringer, who is British, but has pretty much almost always, with Cage Warriors, has fought in the US. Like, these are the guys that are coming through. Chasen Blair's another one. So I love it personally. And I think keeping it separate damages the overall Cage Warriors brand, because what was happening initially was we would get into fight weeks and it was a San Diego card and I literally couldn't give a shit. And I know a lot of folks couldn't either. But now Cage Warriors San Diego card comes around and I'm looking at the card hoping that some of my favorite guys are on there. So I think it's really good. And I think what I was looking forward to in this fight was, if Roberto Hernandez did win, what would Cage Warriors do? Because he'd take the belt back to San Diego. That would probably attract a lot of fighters to join Cage Warriors, to fight for Cage Warriors, because it's a proven ground. It's got a very easy system. Fighters are regularly funneled into the UFC. People have theories as to why that happens, or maybe some conflicts of interest that I won't go into, because we've spoken about it before, and I've hammered that home quite a few times. But it's a pretty easy path for fighters. You do well enough in Cage Warriors, you tend to get the call, unless you're Paul Hughes and for whatever reason you get shafted by the UFC. But I was interested to see, if Roberto Hernandez did take the belt home, how many cool US fighters would that have attracted? Guys who have recently been cut from the UFC, or guys who couldn't find their feet in PFL or Bellator. Who could that attract? But it turns out that doesn't really matter, because if you thought Liam Gittins was good against Reece McEwen, what an exceptional performance this guy put in against Roberto Hernandez. Just one-way traffic throughout the entire fight. And let me restate, like, Roberto Hernandez is a very, very legit prospect. Like, very legit. Has one of the cleanest jabs I've seen in Cage Warriors, like rostered fighters. He's got such a slick jab. Liam Gittins was just tremendous. And that level of performance really came from the way that he started. And it was kicking the calf early. He was firing whenever Hernandez would throw a strike. So Hernandez jab, bang. Gittins had him. Gittins would throw a kick in. Hernandez would, try and throw a straight, or he'd miss a shot, or he'd throw a loose strike, bang. His calf was just getting chewed up. 3 in a row at one point, uncontested, unchecked. I don't think he checked any calf kicks in this fight. And Gittins really was finding a home for it. Hernandez fighting off the back foot where, he's usually comfortable pumping his jab and, not always having to be the aggressor. He does fight well off the back foot. But Gittins, like, one thing I'll say about him is I thought he cut the cage so well in this fight, especially in the first round. And that's where he was able to get these calf kicks. He wasn't allowing Hernandez to move too much. Hernandez was moving backwards the whole fight. Like, he couldn't move to the left or move to the right because Gittins was just cutting the damn cage, and he was doing a tremendous job of it. Hernandez tried to wrestle a bit rounds 2, round 3. Both fighters trading out in the open, but Gittins just popping right back up whenever he was taken down. Hernandez kept fishing for a heel hook that, at one point actually there was a heel hook in round 2 where, he did pull at a knee bar as well, and it looked like he might get Gittins out of there, but Gittins, whenever he was taken down, he'd either pop right back up or he'd take Hernandez's back, soften him up with punches, trying to go for the rear naked choke. It's just really tremendous. Second round was probably Hernandez's best, but even then, the pressure and the damage in round 2 towards the end swung it in Gittins' favour. And I had it 40-36. Like, we go through round 3 and 4. I had Gittins winning the fight in every single round. Clean elbows in the guard, kept fishing for the heel hook and for the leg, like I said, with Hernandez. I think it was really round 3 where he had that knee bar. But just the repetitive strikes from Gittins, tripling up on the calf kick again in round 4, and turning the kick not just to the calf, but also going just above the knee as well. Like, it was just a beautiful kind of destruction of his lead leg. And there was even a point where, Gittins was targeting the back leg. Like, he was just whipping his leg around and just getting the back leg. It was brilliant. The knees to the body and the clinch. Hernandez had little energy. And in round 4, he looked broken. He looked tired. But he was wasting, all that was left of his energy was being wasted on spinning elbows. It was just strange. Like, for such a good fighter, I just think Liam Gittins broke him and just put in one hell of a performance. Round 5, he drops Hernandez with the calf kick, follows up with big shots on the ground, circled to the back, sunk his hooks in. He's just striking away, drags him backwards to the ground, rear naked choke, and secures the submission in the 5th round. 13-4 now is Liam Gittins, and still, what a fucking beatdown that was. Like, a real whooping, just steamrolled Hernandez, and getting the finish was the ice on the cake. What I love about Gittins, if you followed him long enough, this guy used to be the most reckless guy. He'd go into the cage, trade, wing hooks, chin up in the air, and now he's just turned. I think I tweeted this, but I said he's gone from a reckless bruiser to a patient and precise dealer of damage. The calf kick, the body shots, the patience on the ground. He's not hammering away, emptying the gas tank. He's hammering away, but really to open you up for a submission. It's just beautiful to see the evolution of Liam Gittins as a guy who I think at one point was on a 3 or 4 fight skid, now holds the belt at 135 pounds. And there's so many people he could defend against. I'm so excited to see who he could defend against. But I don't know that we will see him do that, because I do think that the UFC shouts are likely to come knocking. If you're a teammate of Paddy's, if you're a next-gen guy, I think it's almost always going to be there for you when you're ready. And Gittins has the gold to his name. He's got the gym. He's got a pleasing fight style. He's got an exciting fight style. He can go 25 minutes. He can end you in 1 round. He's also gettable as well. Like, that's also great for the UFC. Like, he's also a guy that you could put in there, and maybe he does go hammer and tongs with someone and gets knocked out. But I think Liam Gittins, just another tremendous win for him, a tremendous title defense, and 2023 Fighter of the Year. Could potentially be 2024 Fighter of the Year if he puts in another one of these performances. We'll move now to the prelims, and we'll try and get through these a bit quicker because I do have a whole nother card to talk about. Craig Rawlins versus Thomas Nichols Burton. Really impressive Nichols Burton here. Undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a pro, making his Cage Warriors debut. Craig Rawlins, probably not a guy people are familiar with, but this was his Cage Warriors debut as a pro, but as an amateur, fought guys like Oban Elliott, for example, who's now in the UFC and cutting incredible promos, which I'm sure everyone has seen. But Nichols Burton, there's 2 ways to my heart, right? And he succeeded in both ways. Walked out of an Arsenal shirt, yes. And then also all the judo trips, man. The Haragoshis, I think he had 2 or 3 Haragoshis, getting Rawlins down. The scarf hold that he had at one point, head and arm choke. This guy's just a whiz on the ground. And he's powerful. Like, 185 pounds is a big guy. He moves brilliantly on the ground. Just really awesome to watch. Nichols Burton dominated Craig Rawlins throughout the entire fight, the ground and pound as well. I felt like Nichols Burton could have struck a bit more, but it doesn't really matter because, in round 3, Rawlins tries to jump for the rear naked choke, goes too high on Nichols Burton, and if you go too high on a guy who's that good as a grappler, what they're going to do, they're going to roll through, fish for the heel hook, and that's what Nichols Burton did and got the submission. Beautiful sub. Not every day that you see a heel hook. 3-0 now as a pro. Big prospect at 185 pounds. Can't wait to see what he's got for us next. Tom Mearns versus Antonio Sheldon was my sleeper pick for fight of the night. I know we don't, Cage Warriors don't officially do a fight of the night, but, I always like to do one in spirit. Antonio Sheldon and Tom Mearns was going to be mine. Just a really hard-nosed UK MMA slugfest I was expecting. Two guys who can get and can get got at the same time. Tom Mearns, a guy who, coming off a win against Bailey Gilbert, has a win over Orlando Wilson Prinz, who conversely has a win over Antonio Sheldon. So a lot of opponents in common here. Sheldon, never in a dull fight, especially his fights with Prinz and Geordie Bax back in 2023 and 2022. Just absolute barn burners despite him not winning them. And it was two guys who, haven't been winning very often, who are happy to scrap. And I guess, look, it wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be, in all honesty. It was a very competitive fight, extremely close, I would say, as it was always going to be. Mearns looked worse for wear than Sheldon, but he gave as good as he got until the third round. I think in the third round, Sheldon, a lot of success when throwing up the middle. Front kick was gorgeous. And Mearns, was doing a great job fighting off the back foot in this fight, but everything that Sheldon threw through the middle was just landing beautifully. Jab late into the round as well, which was really good from Antonio Sheldon. I scored the fight for him 29-28. I did give Mearns round 10. I did give him round 1, scored it 10-9 to him. Even though he looked worse for wear, he landed the better shots in my opinion. It was a very competitive fight, probably not as exciting as I thought it was going to be, but Antonio Sheldon gets his hand raised once again. That's 2 in a row for him now. And swiftly moving forward, we had Andy Yates versus Christian Tebbit. Yates 1-0 as a pro, making his Cage Warriors debut. A decent amateur background and someone who I was very excited to see make his debut. Christian Tebbit 3-2, also making his Cage Warriors debut, but has some good amateur fights. Fought Fran Breen, who we'll talk about in this breakdown. Don't you doubt it, because in love with that kid's performance on this card. We'll get there. Let's talk about Andy Yates, because he won this fight by decision. I thought it was a very, very close, very competitive and a fun fight. Had it 29-28 to Yates. Could have easily gone either way. Don't get it twisted. Tebbit dropped Yates with a jab. I think Yates was a bit off balance in round 1, but he does drop him with the jab. Even though Yates got dropped, this is what you do, right? If you get dropped early in a round, that doesn't mean the round is over. It doesn't mean you've lost the round. And this is a good example of when, someone getting dropped doesn't just mean that they automatically concede the round on a scorecard. Because Yates, gets the takedown halfway through the round. Tebbit does some, good job to kind of scramble out of the position. But then Yates spinning back elbow, landed some great shots, some really powerful shots in this fight. Took all the momentum away from Tebbit after getting dropped. I scored round 1 10-9 to him. I could see why someone would score it to Tebbit, and I do think this fight was super competitive. So maybe that's one you could have given. Round 2, both guys trading, firing shots, just really back and forth. If you're going to go back and watch a fight from these prelims, from just to see a back and forth brawl, that's the one you want to watch. Tebbit did catch Yates off balance with the jab again, not a knockdown, but another big moment for him. Yates was chasing a lot. Tebbit was cutting off the cage, but Tebbit wasn't really throwing much in round 2. Yates landed a good couple of shots. Elbow in the clinch was really nice. And just as it looked as though the fight was getting away from Yates, he did kind of, get it back. But I did score this round for Tebbit. And then round 3, Yates, really nice straight shot, a minute and a half into the round. Best shot of it at that point. Again, Tebbit cutting the cage, not throwing much. Had a nice jab in there, but Yates really clean work to the body, fighting off the back foot, which I think is why the splitty happened. In fact, actually, I don't even think this was a split. I think it was unanimous for Yates, but I can see why people would score it for Tebbit. He was the one being the aggressor, as I like to say. But Yates was fighting off the back foot and fighting off it brilliantly. Scored it for him, 29-28. He's 2-0 now as a pro, and at 125 pounds, it's nice to see some more prospects coming through. Michelangelo Lupoli versus Sheldon Ryan was a very interesting fight, and this one was one that did actually end up being a split decision and quite contentious. I mean, I had people tweeting me when I scored it to Lupoli. I scored it 30-27. People tweeting me saying they thought Sheldon Ryan won. One guy was really incensed, saying that, no, it wasn't a 30-27 to Lupoli. It was a 29-28, and he was really passionate about that. But I didn't really see it. Like, the fight was super competitive. I can see how you could have given Sheldon Ryan a round in this fight, but I just thought Lupoli did the better work. He was the aggressor in this one. Prodding jab to the body, really nice. I love a jab to the body. I think it's really underutilized. Lupoli was basically evading a lot of danger in this fight. Fighting to avoid a loss, maybe you could say. And yes, like, Sheldon Ryan was often, Lupoli was being the aggressor, but at the same time, there were parts, especially in round 3, where Sheldon Ryan was the guy pressing forward, and Lupoli was throwing, not in combination, was landing the better shots, but didn't look as active. Sheldon Ryan was moving a lot more, but I thought Lupoli was landing the better shots and was landing the cleaner shots and the more impactful shots. I scored at 30-27 for him. Not a fight to write home about, but another win for Lupoli to get him out of that skid that he's on. Such a fun 125, really explosive. Sheldon Ryan fought well here, kept the fight competitive where he could, but yeah, I thought Lupoli won. And at this point, we've been talking for quite a bit, and this was the second fight on the card, which was Fran Breen versus Costin Buna. And I'm going to talk, I will try to keep it quick, but Fran Breen, man, what a performance. Kids 1-0 coming into this fight. Won a very fun decision over Enrique Montalvo back in June last year. Next gen MMA fighter. He's basically a smaller Luke Riley, a 125 Luke Riley. The way Luke Riley pins people against the fence and rips to the body, Fran Breen's doing that. The lovely, hooks to the head, like the quickness of the strikes. It was just tremendous. In love with Fran Breen's performance in this fight. Low kick was spinning Buna, like really spinning him off his feet. Buna just looked shattered after the first round, just could not keep up at all with the pace of Fran Breen. Left hook to the body, froze Buna towards the round. There was a lovely uppercut in this fight, a Superman punch from Fran Breen. 23 years of age, just amazing. Like, Buna was trying to take him down and Breen was attacking the neck just to get back to his feet. He just wanted to stand and bang with this guy. Props to Buna, because I don't know how he survived the entire 2.5 rounds until, in the third round, halfway through, Fran Breen did eventually crumble him. It's tees off on him against the fence, lands a bunch of strikes. Buna kept throwing these weird, like, Hail Mary elbows, and funnily enough, it's the elbow that would spell the end for him, because Breen had a gorgeous downward elbow, framed off the head, which was really good. And you thought maybe he's going to disengage, just whacks him just behind the ear with a stunning elbow, straight to the side of the head, threw a bunch of strikes more, and Mark Goddard stepped in. Fran Breen, 2-0 now as a pro. And I'm going to stick my neck out there and say that this kid's got the goods, and he's really, really got the goods. Keep an eye on him, because I think he can go really, really far. Also want to shout out just really quickly, because I'm not going to go into breaking down every single fight, and this was the prelim opener. Mario Minhaj versus Qadrian Palata. Minhaj, fantastic performance, amazing triangle choke. I thought Palata was winning. Round 1, he definitely stole, but Minhaj just brilliant on the ground. Palata kept re-engaging with him whenever they'd break, and that ended up killing him, because the triangle choke from Minhaj put him 6-0 now as a pro. Really slick grappling, really awesome performance. The Italians I follow love him, and I'm sure we'll see him out there again very soon. But just wanted to shout that out before I move on to Cage Warriors 167. A really fun fight was Cage Warriors 168. A lot of fun finishes, and funnily enough, I tweeted this and it got mentioned on the broadcast as well, which was a very fun moment for me. to hear the pod shouted out on a broadcast. But this was the first ever Cage Warriors card dating back to 2005 that didn't contain a first round finish. Every single finish on this card was either in round 2 or round 3. And usually you equate first round finishes to excitement, but it doesn't matter because we had so many late finishes on this card, and this card was just insanely fun, insanely good, and yeah, just an exceptional one. So just to put a bow on that, Cage Warriors 168, some great scraps. If you're going to go back, definitely pick out some of the fights I waxed lyrical about here. Watch both of the title fights because they were good stuff. Luke Riley, amazing. Go watch Giordano's Bloodbath with Sam Kelly, and go watch Fran Breen's performance again because, yeah, kid's amazing. All right, and now for the Cage Warriors 167 portion of this breakdown. I'm going to fly through a few of these. We'll work our way, actually. We'll start with the prelims and work our way up, which we don't often do, but I think it's probably better this way because we can just rattle them off. We had Leon Arms winning a decision against Christian Tosco. Leon Arms, one of my favorite prospects in Cage Warriors, goes 2-0 now, which is great to see. One of the top prospects in the UK, fights out of MFA with the Hardwick brothers, so you know what he's about. Beautiful straight shots to the body in this fight, and a lot of attention to the body in general. Some great striking combinations from Arms. I think he's really, really good. Tosco was game, but I scored it 29-28 to Arms. He's such a fun, scrambly grappler, and on the feet, he's a banger, and it was really good to watch that one. Speaking of grapplers, Matthew Camilleri, also known as the Squid, which is a great nickname for someone who is a pest on the ground and can finish you in so many different angles. Took on Nicolas Solinas. Solinas 5-5 on a 2-fight skid, made his Cage Warriors debut. Camilleri, not making his debut, did lose to Adam Shelley in a tremendous performance for Adam Shelley back in September. But Camilleri in this fight did some great work, controlled the hell out of Salinas in round 1, almost gave him the 10-8, but he didn't really throw many shots, didn't really threaten with many subs. But in round 2, all it took was another takedown, beautiful transition, stepped over the guard to go into side control, rained down some strikes and elbows, eventually took the back, landed some strikes on Salinas to I guess frustrate him really, and Salinas kind of stopped trying to defend the choke and tried to defend all the punches, and Camilleri choked him out. That's 6 career losses for Salinas and his 4th by submission, so definitely some interesting matchmaking there. I think Camilleri was definitely set up for an awesome submission win, and that's what he did. Sergio Gavinelli versus Helio Hernandez was awesome. Gavinelli making his Cage Warriors debut, and I cannot wait to see this guy fight again because all it took was 38 seconds for him to dispatch Helio Hernandez in what has to be one of the fastest Cage Warriors finishes at welterweight. Helio Hernandez, obviously, was one half of one of the very, very quickest knockouts of all time in Cage Warriors when he was slumped by Chase and Blair back in 2022, which was the last time we actually saw him. Came into this fight against a 4-2 Gavinelli, like I said, making his debut, prolific finisher, and that's all it took. Was 38 seconds really. Gavinelli pressed early, got him down, switched to the back, just started striking away at him. One left hand in particular must have really hurt Helio Hernandez because he landed it on the ground and Helio just turtled up immediately. Goddard stepped in. I think, it was just one of those fights where Helio's not a bad fighter, but I think Gavinelli came in here just angry. Like you saw him once the referee stepped in, once Goddard stepped in, Gavinelli was just walking around the cage angry, just mean mugging. Looked like he could have probably knocked out another 2 or 3 people. So yeah, again, my Italians on social media, they love him. So yeah, let's see what he does next. We then had a pretty dull fight, I'm not going to lie, between Jack Claffey and Marco Sarasiavi. Jack Claffey, a former WWE wrestler. I'm not a big pro wrestling guy, but supposedly he fought in the WWE under some gentleman kind of persona. I don't know. All the wrestling people are laughing at me right now, but I have no clue. I haven't watched wrestling in many, many, many years, like back when it was WWF and the ECW and WCW and all of that crap. So yes, Jack Claffey came into this fight against Sarasiavi, who I hold in high regard. And, first round, had some great, scrambles, some great grappling exchanges. But my word, if you want to watch a bad striking fight, in fact, just avoid this. Please take my word for it. It's one of the worst striking battles I've seen in a long time. Rounds 2 and round 3 were awful. Both guys really slow, not throwing in combination. Just a hideous fight. Jack Claffey won split decision. I scored it 29-28 in his favor. And yeah, that's effectively all I'm going to say about that fight. Anthony Orozco was on this card. You guys know how much I love Anthony Orozco. Fought veteran in Lucas Rodriguez, making his Cage Warriors debut. Obviously, Orozco 2-0 coming into this, prolific finisher. A brilliant all-rounder, one of the best amateurs in the world before he turned pro. Incredible, stretch in IMAF. Just a top athlete, a really, really top athlete. And, maybe he wasn't happy with this fight, going the decision. He probably would have wanted to finish. But I thought he looked brilliant here. His cardio, Lucas Rodriguez wouldn't break. It's so hard to grapple and wrestle with someone who's so long and gangly. And Orozco really felt that in this fight. Like, Lucas Rodriguez was tough to grapple with. And I think Orozco would say that himself. But he was hitting some nice switches. He was dominating all the grappling exchanges, don't get me wrong. But he was struggling to really get a grip on Lucas Rodriguez. But that's what happens, right? And this is why you matchmake the way you do. Because Anthony Orozco, we might not have seen, another incredible finish, but sometimes you need to see what a guy's made of. What does Orozco look like when he can't get a guy out of there early? What does Orozco look like when he can't dominate a guy for 15 minutes on the ground, or when he can't just smoke a guy? And what does his cardio look like when he's forced to go 15 minutes, when he's forced to really fight in every exchange, when he's forced to really fight for every grappling moment? And he looked brilliant. His cardio looked brilliant. He's 3-0 now. Super prospect. And I just want to shout out just a tweet I got from Gary F or Europe_MMA, one of my favorite followers, actually. He said, the insane matchmaking where every prospect had to dig extremely deep to get a win at Cage Warriors 167 will do each of them wonders in their career later on to grind that hard so soon. Totally agree. And I think Orozco is a great example of that. Really typifies what Gary's saying here. That's exactly it. Like, you want to see these guys dig deep and show what they've got, and Orozco did exactly that. Amori Jr. probably had the biggest upset of both cards, the Friday and the Saturday. Amori Jr. 16-11 comes in here against an 8-0 Giuseppe Ruggieri, making his return to the yellow gloves, first time in almost 2 years. His last fight had been a decision win over Dean Truman. I thought Ruggieri was going to come in here and smoke Amori Jr. Unfortunately, due to some fight pass technical issues, we didn't really get to see a great deal of the fight. But where we did, Junior seemed to be doing some good stuff. Single leg to get Ruggieri down was really good. Got the stoppage on the ground. I wish I could talk about this more because it was such an epic underdog win. But in all truthfulness, I didn't see much of it, and nor did anyone else, because the broadcast, we had a technical issues screen, we had a black screen, we had a lot of audio issues. It was just not a great watch. So props to Mori Jr. Maybe one day we'll have a better version of that fight to rewatch. The prelim headliner was between Teddy Stringer and Diego Dixon. Teddy Stringer, one of my favorite prospects, and what does this guy do in almost every fight? He goes in and he blows the fucking doors off the hinges. Diego Dixon, supposedly a BJJ black belt, started his MMA career in 2007, returned to MMA after a 10-year absence, lost his return fight, which placed him at 4-2, comes in here to make his Cage Warriors debut. An interesting career, but, and I mean no disrespect to Diego Dixon, and I have a lot of love for grapplers and jiu-jitsu practitioners, but Stringer made him look like he'd won his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt out of a cereal box, or he'd been gifted it for his birthday, just on a whim. Teddy Stringer just dominated this guy, just beat on him, took him to the ground, had his way with him, and it was that in the first round, got him down, got the body triangle in, pulled Dixon backwards, started to work for the rear naked choke. Dixon not even fighting the hands, was punching behind his head instead of fighting the hands. I don't know what black belt does that, but it's the old saying, right? Like every time a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt gets punched in the head in an MMA fight, they go down a rank. So maybe that's what happened for Teddy Stringer, but 3-0 now. Guy's on fire. He's just flying. Michele Martignoni knocked out Raz Bring. Martignoni's back, and he had a hellacious combination here where he landed 2 knees against the fence, just continued stalking him, left jab, doubled up again on the jab, left hook to the body, which brought down Raz Bring's right hand, and Martignoni delivered the kill shot, right hand over the top. Crispy combination, lovely stuff. Michele Martignoni, 9-2 now. And, this was a real like y'all must have forgot type of performance from Michele Martignoni. He's back and he's mean. Connor Wilson versus Davide Scarano was a pretty decent fight. I scored it 30-27 to Wilson, but Scarano, all my props to him because the guy that compromised the lead leg from basically minute one. Connor Wilson beat the crap out of that lead leg. Super crafty from Connor Wilson, actually. Spinning back kick to the body. Some awesome stuff, like some really good boxing combinations as well. Sneaky left hand to the body. What I loved here, I'm a J-kick guy. I'm a Japanese kickboxing guy. My man did a Yoza kick to the lead leg. Straight up Yoza kick from Connor Wilson. He's immediately a favorite of mine. Great performance from him. Climbs up to 5-3 now. A lot of fights at flyweight here on this card, and I loved every single one of them. Props to Connor Wilson, a really good win for him. Shirzad Qadrian versus Emanuele Zaccaria went exactly as I thought it would. Zaccaria, a great prospect for a lot of people, 6-1 as a pro, third fight in Cage Warriors, coming off a win. But Shirzad Qadrian, for me, this was my sleeper pick for fight of the night on this specific card. And, it didn't really go that way. Like, I thought Qadrian would win, and he did exactly that. It took him just a round to do it. Qadrian, an amazing grappler, amazing striker, recently beat Rory Evans via rear naked choke back in November. And Evans is a guy that is one of the best grapplers in Cage Warriors. But amazing from Qadrian. They both started well early, trading big shots, but Qadrian got him down. Beautiful pass over the top to get into side control, which is impressive because Zaccaria is awesome off his back. Zaccaria regained full guard. Qadrian dragged him over to the fence post, pinned his head against it, started landing some good strikes as he looked to post up. Qadrian just then did post up, landed strike after strike after strike, and just broke Zaccaria. Tremendous performance, 5-1, 22 years of age. Mark my words right now, he will be a Cage Warriors champion one day, and if he doesn't, it will be because he's been snapped up by a huge organization. Shirzad Qadrian's the truth. This guy is very, very good. In the co-main event of this card, we had Team Renegade guy in Omiel Brown versus Rafael Aronov, and it was your typical Omiel Brown performance. One of my favorite fighters to watch in Cage Warriors. Super exciting prospect, despite losing his opportunity to win the belt last year when he got knocked out by Yanis Bakar. But everything we love about Brown and everything we worry about Brown was, in this fight and evident for us to see. He was amazing. Every time he had Aronov hurt, he would chase Aronov, and Aronov almost knocked him out twice. Definitely dropped him a couple of times. Omiel Brown, great recovery on him, but he needs to fight smarter. It's really terrifying. He's got all the tools. He's a power striker. He's a power grappler. I wouldn't say he's a technician in either field, but he can really, put you out. He'll either knock you out or put you to sleep. And, we've seen fights where that hasn't been the case. He's chased and he's lost, like the Skabinski fight, like the Yanis Bakar fight. But in this one, chasing did him the world of good because, though there was some good strikes that he absorbed, and though it did look like Aronov was going to beat him at one point, Brown got him down, bailed on the back. He had his back at one point of striking, bailed on it, jumped the gilly. Don't be silly, jump the gilly. That's what they say. And Omiel Brown did exactly that. Another impressive finish to add to his portfolio. 7-3 now. Omiel Brown can do amazing things at 170, but Omiel Brown can be the cause of his own demise as well. If he learns to fight smart, he can go really far. If he doesn't, it's always going to be you win some, you lose some, and he'll always be a fun action fighter. But what can he do outside of that? Can he be champion? I still think he can, but I know a lot of people, even though he won here, I know it did, talking to a few people online after the fight, it did concern people as well, how he performed. And then our headliner for this unplugged card, which are the cards that they do to, select audience and cards that they build around a lot of prospects. We had a guy who isn't a prospect, two guys who aren't prospects in the main event, Stefano Paterno versus Scotty Stockman. Paterno, let me give you guys some education. If you haven't been following Cage Warriors for long, This was his first fight for the promotion in almost 6 years. Has fought most notably for Bellator. Paterno, the former Cage Warriors welterweight champion, lost his belt to Ross Houston, but almost won that fight as well via knockout in the fourth round. But Ross Houston fought brilliantly to come back. He won his belt by defeating Merdad Janzamini. 16-4-1 now as a pro, back in Cage Warriors, still young, 28 years of age he is. And if he stays in Cage Warriors and stays active, he could well insert himself in the title picture at 170. Scotty Stockman making his Cage Warriors debut on a 7-fight win streak, all first round finishes. But take a look at some of the people he beat. Just do it. I don't even want to talk about it too much, but he's beat some real cans. I hate the term, but he's really just whooped on some of the worst people to have ever fought in MMA, in all honesty. But and watching him fight, the way he fought, the way he's built, the way he looked like a early 2000s MMA fighter. Looked a bit small for 170 as well. But look, Stefano Paterno, amazing first round submission for him. Stockman tried a couple of spinning back fists in this, but Paterno just kept dipping every time he did and would just take him down. And that was the sequence really where he got the finish. Paterno took him down off the spinning back fist. Stockman on his knees trying to build to his feet with his hands down. What on earth are you doing? Hands down on your knees. You're going to get choked the fuck out against a guy like Paterno. That's what Paterno did. Fun round for how long it lasted really. Paterno definitely someone to keep an eye on as a future title hopeful again, because he's been a champ before, and I wouldn't doubt it if he does it again, in all honesty. He's got all the time in the world behind him at only 28 years of age. That's a lot of talking and a lot of fight breakdowns and a lot of fights. That's 24 fights in probably about an hour of your time listening. I thought it would be this long, but look, it had to be done. You put 2 fight cards on back-to-back days, we're going to have a bumper episode of the pod. I had a great time. Manchester was spoiled rotten. So many prospects, so many great finishes, so many great moments. 2 title fights, a new champion, a champion defending his belt in incredible fashion. They had it all in Manchester. Tremendous cards. Once again, like really just a great way to start the year. Back in Europe and back doing what Cage Warriors do best. We've got one more card this month, which is Cage Warriors 169 in London, which I'm hopeful of getting to actually. Some great fighters on that card. Jimmy Quinn, Will Curry, Jordan Vucenic. We were supposed to have a title fight, George Hardwick on that, but unfortunately, due to a jaw injury, he won't be fighting. And yeah, I look forward to being back at the end of the month, chatting fights with you guys again. If you enjoyed listening to this pod, if you lasted this long, drop a review wherever you're listening to this on. Give us a download, a like, whatever you can. Spread the word about the pod. Still the only podcast that I'm aware of that covers Cage Warriors exclusively, doesn't cover anything else. So we're fighting the good fight, trying to spread the word about European MMA and UK MMA. So let's keep that going. Thank you very, very much for listening, and I will catch you all at the end of the month.